Welcome back, guys. Hope you guys are doing amazing. Rise of Augustus. We are continuing. We just, of course, saw the Parthian campaign by Antony. That's now gone. Sextus is gone. There's only two standing now. Octavian, Antony. West, East. What do we do here? Let's find out together. Glad you're here. Let's go.
Replaced by proxy wars and political maneuvering. Both men had been able to claim that they were acting in accordance with Caesar's legacy, and could legitimize their wars as being necessary for the stability of the Republic. The destruction of the last remnants of the Pompeian faction and the sidelining of Lepidus meant that, in theory, the ultimate goal of the civil war had been achieved. Caesar had been avenged, and the Republic was fully under the control of the Caesarians. In reality, though, all that had been achieved was the removal of the final buffers separating the two.
Yeah, but not to say a lot of political moves happened, especially taking that blockade and that famine away was huge. Huge.
The last great civil war of the Roman Republic to decide who would be the master of Rome loomed on the horizon.
And by the way, I know I'm pausing a lot. The Roman Republic's about to be gone, guys. Kind of sad.
The end of 36 BC had seen Octavian build upon his position by completing the conquest of Sicily from Sextus Pompey, and then ousting Lepidus and absorbing many of his powers and legions into his own. Antony, meanwhile, had fared poorly in his Parthian campaign, and returned to Alexandria to regroup. Both men were aware that with Lepidus out of the equation, a direct confrontation was inevitable and began consolidating their positions. In the west, Octavian launched a series of campaigns along the Adriatic coast against the Pannonians in 35 BC.
The Pannonians? Never heard of them.
Whom Cassius Dio, an eventual governor of the area, describes as leading the most miserable existence of all mankind, but also as the bravest of all men of whom we have knowledge. The details regarding the campaign are rather minimal, and it seems to have been over rather quickly, with Octavian successfully taking the city of Siscia and leaving a subordinate, Geminus, to govern the area.
So we got some more land?
A year later, Octavian and Agrippa would launch a similarly quick yet successful campaign in Dalmatia. While there is again little information about this conflict, the most important detail is that in both instances, Octavian and Agrippa fought a campaign on both land and sea, giving their army and navy crucial experience that would prove invaluable in the coming years.
Yeah, and we already know Agrippa's pretty much good at both, especially at sea, as we saw him become like an admiral against Pompey.
Meanwhile, in the east, Antony set his plans in motion to avenge himself on the Armenian king Artavasdes, who had deserted him so early during the campaign in Atropatene. In the following years, Antony made numerous attempts to lure the Armenian king out of his kingdom and to Alexandria, but Artavasdes was a cautious man and
What, are you gonna kill him if he came? That would be a coward move.
refused the invitations. At last, in 34 BC, after many bribes, envoys, and other means, Antony was able to convince Artavasdes to meet him. When he did, Antony immediately had him seized and imprisoned, and moved all of his 16 legions into Armenia.
Antony is I mean, you can look at this in two POVs, like, for the Republic, he did a really good job, kind of like luring him out, but man, when you talk about combat and military and all of that stuff, there's two ways to look at it. There's one where it's the dirty war, you do whatever it takes, and then you do this. You lie and you maneuver. I don't know. I wouldn't say like this is an achievement by any means by Antony, because this is just something happen chance that you maneuvered your words and positioning to, like, this isn't a conquest by any means. This isn't satisfaction. If you're like Antony, I wouldn't be satisfied. I would be like, we did it, we didn't do it the way I wanted it to be done.
The details for this campaign are again vague. There seems to have been some resistance, led by Artavasdes' son, but there does not seem to have been any large-scale battles. Rather, Antony's intervention in Armenia seems to have been more like a raid, intended to remind the locals of Rome's supremacy and the cost of going against her, rather than a war of conquest. Simultaneous to these military affairs, Antony and Octavian were both making moves politically. With Lepidus out of the picture, Octavian targeted his formidable propaganda machine squarely on Antony and Cleopatra.
Yep. This woman is basically trying to take Rome for herself. A lot of other rhetoric, like she is controlling. Antony is an enemy of the Republic, blah, blah, blah.
A crucial figure in this, and one often sidelined in discussions of the time period, was Octavian's sister Octavia. She had already played an important role in Octavian's career, cementing the triumviral alliance in 40 BC by marrying Antony, and had been a crucial go-between for the two triumvirs, helping to negotiate the treaty and promises of mutual support in 37 BC. Moreover, Octavia was renowned in Roman society as a paragon of wife and motherhood. In 35 BC, in the aftermath of the Atropatene campaign, Octavia had headed east with gifts for Antony, and according to some sources, 2,000 of the 20,000 men that Octavian had promised to Antony. Rather than meeting her in Greece, however, Antony sent her a letter telling her to stay in Athens, while he himself went to Alexandria.
Kind of weird, though. That's his wife. And I know, like I said before, this is a different time and so many other, factors here. But Antony, I mean, like, monogamy is not like an always do it situation. It seems that way, at least.
Octavian and his allies leapt upon the scandal, arguing that it clearly showed Antony's allegiances lay with a foreign queen rather than the most ideal Roman wife. In the autumn of 34 BC, in Alexandria,
it's not wrong either.
Antony carried out a kind of triumph to mark his success in Armenia, riding through the streets on a chariot and parading the Armenian king in his procession. In the end, according to the sources, Antony and Cleopatra sat upon ornate oriental chairs, with Antony dressed in Eastern garb as Dionysus and Isis. It was here that Antony supposedly made his infamous donations. In front of a large crowd, Antony purportedly recognized Caesarion as the legitimate heir to Julius Caesar, and proclaimed him king.
And that's actually Julius Caesar's child with Cleopatra, right?
King of Kings, while Cleopatra was proclaimed Queen of Kings, and gifted the lands of Egypt and Cyprus. Moreover, the children of Antony and Cleopatra were all also given land, the yet-to-be-conquered Armenia, Media and Parthia to Alexander, Cyrenaica and Libya to Selene, and lastly Syria, Phoenicia and Cilicia to Ptolemy.
Problem is, there's going to be a conflict of interest here of, these aren't your lands to give out. XYZ, XYZ. He is a triumvir. But you didn't even meet with Octavian about this.
Antony apparently went so far as to send dispatches to Rome to repeat the proclamation to the Senate and get their approval of it, although the consuls are...
That's pretty good then. I appreciate that by Antony. If the approval is actually genuine versus, hey, we're doing this, approve it.
At the time, Gaius Sosius and Domitius Ahenobarbus, both loyal friends of Antony, refused to allow the proclamation to be read, knowing how damaging it would be, much to Octavian's frustration. These donations remain a topic of some debate among historians to this day. It must be remembered, after all, that the surviving sources for this period are largely pro-Octavian, with some of them being based directly on Octavian's own memoirs, and thus presenting the narrative that Octavian wanted to present. Some, such as Halfman, argue that Antony was embracing his complicated mixed role of being both a Roman and a kind of Hellenic dynast, and perhaps articulating what his later vision for the East was.
It's an interesting version of that Hellenic dynast. So like the Hellenistic age, obviously post-Alexander, all those lands, it's kind of also weird, it's not weird, it's just interestingly ironic that his child, which was named Alexander, would have the most eastern province.
In this interpretation, Antony was not actually promising to hand over land to Cleopatra or her children, but would have placed them as more symbolic rulers of the areas, while existing client kings would be kept in power but subordinate to Cleopatra and Caesarion.
Okay.
Others say that the proclamation was meant purely for a local audience, a declaration to the
Well, if it was meant for a local audience, why do we send a message to Rome?
Alexandrians, specifically that he would aim to restore the Ptolemaic Empire to its previous glory, and that the donations were simply a rhetorical device. Finally, there are those, such as Patterson, who doubt how realistic the episode is entirely. Antony was a talented politician, and well aware of the importance of public opinion. So is it really believable that Antony, in the midst of repairing his reputation after his defeat in Parthia, would make such an obviously disastrous and poorly judged move as the donations? After all, even if Antony did not intend to give over the land directly, and intended the titles to be more symbolic, it was still a slight to the famously anti-monarchist Romans and other allied monarchs.
What do you guys think?
Patterson instead argues that some aspects are likely true, such as Antony proclaiming
Well, it's the thing about King of Kings and Queen of Kings, that is directly coinciding with like a monarchist view, right?
Caesarion to be Julius Caesar's true heir, and proclaiming Caesarion and Cleopatra as King and Queen of Egypt, both of which would be sensible and logical steps for Antony to take. The other donations, particularly those to Antony and Cleopatra's own children, could very well be fabrications of Octavian's propaganda.
Maybe.
Almost all, however, agree that Antony did confirm Cleopatra as Queen of Egypt, and Caesarion as Julius Caesar's heir.
That's not bad though. Like, yeah, when you put that in that case, like Egypt is like an autonomous area. I know it's hugely influenced by Rome, but it's acting like with some autonomy right now, right? Some autonomy. There is not a ton of autonomy. Like they have their own military, especially Mark Antony there, but they have some autonomy.
Thereby establishing him as a direct rival to Octavian, and further increasing tensions between the two. News of these affairs, true or false, soon reached Rome and was quickly capitalized on by Octavian, who attacked Antony as being bewitched by Cleopatra and scorning
Bewitched, wow.
Roman values by his style of dress and actions. It is something of an irony that the Octavian propaganda focused on Antony's style of dress and hair, when these same arguments had been used against Octavian's adopted father, Caesar, to demonize him. In retaliation, Antony accused Octavian of being a tyrant, removing
That's such a slander, right?
Lepidus from the triumvirate without Antony's approval, and taking all of Lepidus's legions and Sicily for himself, rather than splitting them. Octavian in turn accused Antony of retaining control over Egypt instead of giving it to the Senate to distribute.
Yeah, both people. I'm not saying either are tyrants here, but both of these individuals have tyrannical tendencies when you look at the old republic. The new republic, what we're in right now, while we're holding on to the republic still, it's very different, obviously, than the republic was 100 years ago, even before like Marius and stuff. It's a way different republic. So like, if these individuals did any of these things 100 years ago, they'd be killed. They'd be killed. But now, it's just like the goalposts keep moving.
Murdering Sextus and dishonorably tricking the Armenian king.
Yeah, that was kind of weird. I mean, I'm sorry. I hate. I'm all for like. I'm not all for military conquest. That's not my my mantra here. But I'm all for like honor and military like accomplishments and such. But you can't have that and also like play the trickster game. Like it's not synonymous. You have to pick one or the other. And if you don't pick one or the other, you're gonna have a tainted military regimen. Like you're gonna be all right. What did you do? Did this? Did this? Oh, you Artavastes. You got him. How'd you get him? Oh.
Meanwhile, Octavia, who had returned from Athens and was living in Antony's home in Rome, was using her position to strengthen Octavian further. As Antony's wife, it was her responsibility to handle his affairs in his absence, including dealing with Antony's clients, many of whom she subtly moved into her brother's pocket, chipping away at Antony's support structure in the city.
Because she knew what he was up to.
Indeed, Octavia had been so useful to Octavian's political campaign that historian Barry Strauss credits her with having done as much for the House of Caesar as any military commander. While Octavia was rather subtle and cunning in turning people against Antony, other agents of Octavian were less so. Calvisius, for example, spread still more rumors about Antony, that he had given hundreds of thousands of books to Cleopatra, that he read love notes from her while dealing with foreign kings, that he once left in the middle of a gripping lecture after seeing Cleopatra passing by, and escorted her instead of staying to hear the speech, and shockingly gave Cleopatra a foot rub at a banquet.
They sound like such tabloid things.
Most of these were dismissed as baseless slander, however, and though Octavian had eroded some of Antony's base, he still did not have enough cause to openly declare war against Antony. In order for that to happen, he would need some far more serious and damaging information.
Yeah.
Fortunately for Octavian, such information soon presented itself.
I wonder what this was. It's been a while since, been months, 6 months or so since we talked about this, so I can't remember exactly what happened. Feel like it's going to be pretty damning though.
Among the numerous people who defected to Octavian were two men in particular, Marcus Titius and Lucius Manatius Plancus. Both men had fought under Antony, Plancus during the Perusine War and Titius during the Atropatene campaign. Why exactly they now betrayed Antony is unclear. Opportunism, bribes, or a fracturing of their relationship.
Hold on, let's do this. Plancus was the uncle of Titius, and in the past they were friends of Cleopatra. According to Plutarch, Cleopatra started to mistreat them due to their refusal of her participation in the war.
With Antony are all possibilities. Whatever the case was, they brought with them information that was useful to Octavian. Most importantly, some details regarding Antony's will. Encouraged by their words, Octavian determined to see the will himself, and ordered his men to seize it from the Vestal Virgins where it had been stored, a grossly blasphemous act.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
Octavian must have known how sacrilegious this would be, but considered this a price worth paying for the information. Gathering the Senate together, Octavian read the will aloud, in which Antony had supposedly reaffirmed the legitimacy of Caesarion, promised yet more land to Cleopatra and her children, and worst of all, requested to be buried in Alexandria rather than Rome.
It's kind of crazy, isn't it? The fact that he went to the Vestal Virgins, like, it's the most sacred place in Rome, right? Right? And then basically rip someone's will out. That's insane. That's crazy. I mean, I don't applaud I don't applaud Octavian at all for this. But, you know, it's one act of insanity is literally just paved over immediately with the words of Antony's will. Like, people probably don't even care about how he got this will once they heard that.
Once again, it is hard not to think that Octavian fabricated many of the details. Antony's will was very likely entrusted to the Vestal Virgins, but it is incredibly unlikely that he had committed to writing such politically damaging ideas if he ever actually had them. As Aeschylus has written before though, in war, truth is the first casualty.
Ah, what a great line.
It did not matter if the contents were true or not. What mattered was that they were believed. To many, the will seemed to legitimize many of the worst accusations made against Antony and Cleopatra, namely that Antony intended to rule Rome as a Hellenic-style monarch, with Cleopatra at his side. It was a significant blow to Antony's reputation, and it was enough for Octavian to weaponize the Senate against him. Declaring that Antony's actions were all the result of Cleopatra, Octavian had the Senate declare war against Cleopatra. This was an important detail. By declaring war on Cleopatra, Octavian could avoid calling it another civil war.
Yeah, so optics.
He could portray himself as a Roman fighting a threatening foreign power, and he forced Antony into a position where he would need to actively align himself with Cleopatra and against Rome.
So smart.
As Octavian knew he would, Antony announced his support for Cleopatra and was subsequently labelled a traitor and stripped of all his powers and authority, leaving Octavian as the only man with full, legitimate triumphal powers.
Jeez.
While many senators sided with Octavian, a good many, including the two consuls for the year, Ahenobarbus and Sosius, viewed Octavian as a tyrant and threw their lot in with Antony,
This feels so reminiscent of the original Civil War, doesn't it?
fleeing to his side. The last war of the Roman Republic had begun. While the propaganda war had been raging, Antony and Cleopatra had moved to Ephesus near the end of 33 BC.
That's where we'll stop today. I know, right? We're like on the cusp of the Battle of Actium. Like I wouldn't say the climax, but yeah, I would say pretty much the climax. Similar to the climax. This was an interesting one, right? It was more about policy and politics and tabloids and really just putting each other, I'm trying not to sneeze, putting each other in a bad light. Mainly Antony in a bad light. He made it easy in some ways, but I think there was obviously some propaganda to the mix, but there's got to be some truth to it. There's got to be some truth of it. Otherwise, there's no way it would stand on its own, right? Let me know what you guys think in terms of like where the truth ends and where the lies start. Now, you might not know, so whatever, but I imagine there's probably some mix of truth into it. Maybe within that will, there's probably some truth to like the will of, and the will is really like when you pass on, this is what happens. That's not that crazy, but I guess like aligning provinces and the optics of being buried in Alexandria versus Rome, that just doesn't look good to like a Roman. But as one of the historians said, he's more of a Hellenic dynast, meaning he has more alignment to the east. He's spent a lot of time in the east too. So anyway, appreciate you guys. We'll be on to the next one. Bye-bye.